Hey guys, and welcome to Politics Snaps. Now I'm joined here by Steve Edginton, who runs the
Politics UK
YouTube channel. He's a top young Brexiteer. He's got about 26,000 followers, is that right? So that's only about 25,900 more than me. And if you want to do something about that, please subscribe. So I'm really excited to have him here, and we're going to say top young Brexiteer. So I guess the obvious thing to start is, how do you think Brexit's going?
I think that Brexit is not going amazingly, to say the least. I think Theresa May has really screwed up with this Chequers plan. I think that, if she'd gone into the European Union from day one, we trigger Article 50 and she had a real plan, even this Chequers plan, let's say, and she'd been negotiating this from the very start, then maybe she would have a lot more credibility. But because she basically lied to Brexiteers, lied to me, lied to you, lied to the voter with her constant sort of hard Brexit rhetoric about leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, ending the jurisdiction of the European, Court of Justice, and lots of other red lines that have just turned pink and just totally gone. Because she's done that, she's lost all credibility with not only with the Conservative Party, with voters, with the European Union, with everyone. So I think it's going to be really difficult for her to get this plan through. Although, to be honest, I'm actually a little bit optimistic for her, because the amount of vitriol and attack that she's had from this plan from Tory Brexiteers has been so much that I have a feeling the European Union might just swallow it, because they see it as this deal that's really unacceptable to these hard Brexiteers, therefore it must be a good deal for Europe. And the EU are desperate to have a deal. I mean, this is something that is not reported. The European Union would be hurt by a no deal far more than Britain would. So I have a feeling this Chequers plan might just get through. And if Theresa May...
I mean, the modified Chequers plan, because obviously it was modified a bit after...
Well, it was a little bit. We don't actually know the extent. Do you know what I mean? We don't know the extent to which to what's actually happened to it, because obviously there's been some amendments to it via Jacob Rees-Mogg amendments, and we don't actually know how much effect they're really going to have on the government's sort of negotiating position. But I have a feeling the plan will just about go through. And if Theresa May doesn't concede on any other issue for continue with this Chequers plan, then she might just make it. She might just make it. But if she does concede to the EU, she's toast. And
I mean, do you think the Chequers plan as it is honours the Brexit result? Like,
God no. I mean, how can it, when the European Union make vast amounts of our laws in terms of goods, and we have literally no say on them? In fact, we are a rule taker, and essentially we are a vassal state for goods. How can that honour the Brexit result?
Is it a betrayal of the Brexit vote?
I would say that her plan is a betrayal. I think that she's really gone in and basically, as I said earlier, she's just lied to the British people, and she's gone back on her promises, and it's not acceptable. And that's why David Davis resigned, and that's why Boris Johnson resigned. These are proper Brexiteers. And I think you see in the government at the moment a real amount of chaos, because Theresa May has simply accepted everything that Oliver Robbins has said, accepted a lot of what the European Union has said, and has essentially given in negotiations on so many issues, conceded on so many fronts, that Brexiteers just simply can't swallow it anymore. And if she'd continued with her sort of quite hardline Brexiteer lines of rhetoric, she would have been fine. But because she's gone back on that, she's toast. And if she does concede, as I say, I think she's gone. But if she doesn't concede and the European Union accepts it, perhaps she will go down as a Prime Minister who fudged a deal. And do you know what? I'll be happy with some kind of Chequers plan that does get us out of the EU, if it means getting out of the EU. Because at the moment, there is a chance we won't leave the European Union. People like Sarah Wollaston MP, who's just joined the People's Vote campaign, who I'm sure you absolutely love.
I know Sarah Wollaston.
She's the first Tory MP, I think, who's just joined this People's Vote, second referendum campaign.
Anna Sue was the first, she's the second.
Oh, Anna Sue, okay, so Sarah Wollaston's the second Tory MP who's done this, and I think there is momentum on that side. So I think if the Chequers plan does get us out of the EU, then thank you, May. If it leads to having a second referendum, therefore remaining in the European Union, then it would be a total disaster. But again, I'm quite happy to leave on no deal.
I mean, do you think that Brexit can ever be delivered by someone who backed Remain? Do you think we need a Brexiteer Prime Minister?
No, God no. I mean, from day one we needed a Brexiteer, because as Theresa May said herself, how can you deliver Brexit if you do not believe in Brexit? And it is clear that she doesn't believe in Brexit. The people that she's put in cabinet, people that she's put in the civil service, the people that she's allowed to remain in the civil service, such as Oliver Robbins, as I said, chief Brexit civil servant, huge Remainer. The whole of the sort of four officers, great officers of state are Remainers. This is a Remainer cabinet.
That's partly because the Brexiteers resigned, to be fair.
She could have replaced them with Brexiteers, but she chose not to.
True.
And from day one, she had a huge majority of cabinet Remainers. I mean, I think that's something like 7 out of like 20-something cabinet ministers are Brexiteers from day one, and that's never really gone up. So Theresa May had a choice. She could have said half and half cabinet, Brexit Remain, maybe even 52-48. I would think was sort of more honourable than the Brexit result. But she's chosen from day one to have a Remainer cabinet. This is a Remainer government run by Remainers for Remainers, and that's just simple.
When you mentioned the People Vote campaign, so obviously there is a big movement being pushed by some people for a second referendum, essentially, to rerun the referendum. What do you think would happen if the referendum was rerun?
I think, first of all, they would probably lose, i.e. the Remainers would probably lose, depending on what the actual options are. So let's say there's 3 options, 2 of which are to leave and 1 of which, so leave on WTO, Chequers plan, or remain in the EU. Remain will win every time because they're splitting the leave vote in 2, which is just totally unfair and absolutely ridiculous, when the leave vote should be the only option, because we voted to leave. What did these people's sort of People's Vote campaign think the first referendum was? Was that not the people voting? And also, I think there would be calls for a third referendum, because why wouldn't Brexiteers say, okay, we've had our go, you've had your go, let's have another go until people get it right. And honestly, it would be a betrayal. It would be a total disaster for democracy. I think voter turnouts would go down. I'm not one of these people who say we're going to have a sort of some kind of revolution or something. I think we're too British for that. But I do think voter turnout would be down. I do think people would lose trust in politicians. I think people would go to UKIP, people would go to the hard right and to the hard left, because mainstream politicians would not represent who they are. And that's not how democracy should run.
I mean, how vitriolic do you think a second referendum campaign would be? I mean, by comparison to the first, which was already pretty bad.
Yeah, so we've seen Dominic Cummings, who obviously was a big part of Vote Leave, and he's basically gave a warning to these Remainers who want a second referendum, saying, Vote Leave 2. You think Vote Leave 1 was harsh? Vote Leave 2 would be a nightmare for the Remainers. But I think it would be an absolute travesty for democracy, because it would just be vitriol on both sides, because it would be Brexiteers saying, this is a total reversal of democracy. If you want to continue along this line, look at how terrible the Europeans are treating us. It would be absolutely horrible. Remainers would say how terribly stupid Brexiteers are, how we're all racist, as they did in the first referendum. But obviously the dire warnings about no deal would carry on. We would have Project Fear 3.0, I think. We're in 2.0 at the moment with WTO, but I think we might be in Project Fear 3.0. So I think that it would be a total disaster for British democracy, and obviously the vitriol would be absolutely unbearable for everyone.
For both sides.
For both sides.
I mean, coming back to, presumably, do you think that a no deal is better than a bad deal? The original Theresa May position.
Of course.
Do you think there's a risk at all that if we crash out without a deal,
I wouldn't use that word, but okay.
If we
had a brilliant World Trade Organization,
Organization,
Brexit,
do you think there's a risk that if we do that and it has some sort of short-term impact on our economy, but it could be kind of the booster to allow Corbyn into number 10? In the sense, I mean, if you think of Brexit, it's kind of like a revolution in a way. Often revolutions don't expect the way the people who ran them expect them to end. Do you think there's a risk that the Brexiteers could end up putting Corbyn in number 10?
It's an interesting perspective. I think it would depend on a lot of this is a huge hypothetical. There's no way of me knowing, but what I can say is that it would depend, A, how large the shock is, B, how long the shock is, and C, who's to blame for that shock. Is it the European Union who are saying, we're not going to trade with you anymore, we're not going to send over those medicines and those vital food packages? Because what would the public think about a continent who we've been tied to for 33 years simply refusing to trade with us? Now, obviously that would never happen, in my opinion. Remainers like to trump up the fact that it would happen, and the European Union would be so vitriolic, so hurt by the fact that we're leaving the European Union without a deal, that they actually say to us, we're no longer going to send you these vital medicines that keep you alive. We're no longer going to send you these food that will keep you alive. Imagine the public opinion towards the European Union. I don't think that would help Corbyn. But again, as I say, it would depend on the length of the shock. So let's say it's a very short-term thing. Let's say 1 year, and the general election's in a few years' time. No, it won't help Corbyn. Obviously, any negative effect to the economy probably wouldn't help Theresa May or the Conservatives, because obviously Corbyn, that would boost the opposition. But I wouldn't say, no, it wouldn't directly lead to a Corbyn government in any sense, although I just have no idea, obviously, because we're in such upheaval times, there's no way of knowing.
Sure. Would a Corbyn government be a price worth paying for Brexit? If to have Brexit you had to follow it with a Corbyn government?
The trouble is with that question,
would you think they're
they are mutually exclusive in that a Corbyn government means there is no Brexit, or at least there is no proper Brexit, because the Labour Party is so full of Remainers that I just cannot imagine there would be A, the parliamentary arithmetic for a proper Brexit to go through or carry on. B, for Corbyn himself to actually stand up to these Remainers and have his proper Brexit views, because we all know he's a Brexiteer anyway.
Sure.
He would never stand up to them, because we've seen him for the last 3 or 4 years now, isn't it, or something, where he's just basically been a Remainer. Although not as hard as some, a half Remainer, sort of not really a Brexiteer, but not really a sort of Anna Soubry type. But I can never imagine that a Labour government it wouldn't be a price worth paying, simply because it wouldn't be worth it in terms of Brexit itself, because Labour's position on Brexit is even worse than the Conservatives' position. They think we should stay in the customs union, and they think that no deal is not even an option. They would essentially say to the European Union, this is our negotiation strategy. We'll accept any deal you give us because no deal is not an option. That's what they say. That's their negotiating position. Just imagine the European Union's response to that. Okay, fine, we'll give you the worst deal possible. Basically becoming an even more of a vassal state than Theresa May's Chequers plan. So a Labour government is no Brexit at all. I mean, even worse than Conservatives or Theresa May.
And do you think that Theresa May's deal is better than membership, presumably? Or is it because of the what interests me is the vassal state element, the bit where, I mean, obviously at the moment,
obviously that's only in goods, right?
Only in goods, yeah.
And Theresa May has a point in that the regulations on goods do not change that frequently. Now, if the European Union did then change those regulations just to spite us and hurt our production or whatever, then yes, it probably would be worse.
Although they'd be screwing themselves out at the same time.
They would be.
They'd have to redesign everything.
Well, exactly. And I don't see that happening, really. But it is about Britain taking back control, and that's why it's not a good thing. But what I would say is that the Chequers deal is better than being outside the European Union, because once we're out, we're out. And that means we can go and renegotiate things that Theresa May we don't like, or whatever. So
for Brexiteers, a top priority is get Britain out.
Get out.
And then worry about the exact
I think
terms.
the trouble is, this is the split in Brexiteers at the moment.
Sure.
So you've got people like Michael Gove and Liam Fox who are in the cabinet who are supporting this Chequers deal in public. I'm sure in private, probably not, maybe Michael Grover's. But their opinion is this: we must get out. We have to get out as soon as possible. As soon as we're out, we'll deal with all that stuff then.
Because they think it's going to be a second referendum.
Precisely, or they think that it's just never going to happen. It'll be delayed and delayed. Corbyn will come to power and just nothing will happen. The second view is, which is the one sort of that I prescribe to, is that the process of us leaving should be done now. We should get all this stuff out of the way now, because if not now, when and who? It's so unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen once we've left. There could be a Remainer Prime Minister, there could be a Corbyn Prime Minister, there could be anything. Anything could happen. So why not try and figure this stuff out now that we can, and try and get the best deal for Britain now that we can, rather than waiting a few years down the line, which is very unpredictable. So there's obviously these two opinions, and I sort of subscribe to the second one, but also the first one definitely has some credence. We need to get out. We've been in this thing for 43 years. It's time to leave.
I mean, you mentioned the Corbyn Prime Ministership. Now, I think we can both agree that Corbyn is a Labour leader like no other. I mean, we've never had a Labour leader before who's given the impression of sympathising with terrorist organisations or with states which are openly hostile to the UK. How bad do you think a Corbyn Prime Ministership would be? It
would be a total disaster for this country. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The fact that he has taken this view on anti-Semitism, which has basically been ignore it, whitewash it at the start until it gets a bit of media attention, then come out with some sort of slightly harsher words, but the actions are basically not there. So, I mean, for years, Corbyn's on tape, on record, and other prominent members of the Labour Party saying that this anti-Semitism thing is basically a witch hunt. Then the press eventually come round and say 100% of the press are just on side. You've got Jewish people coming out and saying this is just enough is enough. Corbyn is forced to say a statement. I think that we've seen for years with Corbyn, it goes back for decades, he's been a campaigner on multiple issues that is just absolutely abhorrent and not not aligned with British values. The fact that he has had these tendencies to go towards groups that are not Britain's allies but rather Britain's enemies, people like going on Iranian propaganda TV, his cabinet going on RT, and and people say, oh, Conservatives go on RT, yeah, I accept that, and I think they shouldn't. But you have seen with Corbyn a huge history of, frankly, views that are just disgusting, and we shouldn't be supporting this.
I mean, the revelation that really shot me recently was there was a suicide attack in Israel, I think in 2003, and the guy that was responsible, or who played some part in organising, he got 7 life sentences. He was freed after Hamas kidnapped an Israeli soldier. And Corbyn on Press TV, they were both on at the same time, where he was appearing by video link, called him his brother. I found it really, really shocking.
Yes.
I mean, just having someone
Just for anyone who doesn't know, Press TV is the Iranian propaganda TV,
yeah.
TV channel. But go on, carry on.
I just find it really shocking that we could have a Prime Minister who takes that sort of attitude, that we could have a Chancellor who praised the bombs and bullets of the IRA. I mean, do you think that if we have a Labour government now, Britain will no longer be a reliable member of the Western Alliance, or perhaps even a member of the Western Alliance at all?
I think the Western Alliance is strong enough to survive a Corbyn government. I think his views will be sort of toned down a little bit, in public at least, by just sanity really and logic. Because if he expresses these views, that a lot of this stuff he denies, and it's clear, it's on evidence. You've said you want to shut down NATO, but obviously he's come back and said that's not true, and all this stuff. So I think that it will be toned down. His private beliefs will be obviously still be there, but still it wouldn't be good for the UK. I don't think it would help out in terms of the Labour Party have talked about banning Donald Trump from the country, refusing to meet with him. This is the US president, the most powerful leader in the world.
I mean, would any other major Liberal Democratic power trust the UK over Corbyn government? Because considering that Corbyn's adherence to basic Liberal Democratic values is questionable.
Trump's questioned that already. Do his allies, trust him? And I think that they have managed to somehow, other leaders have done better than others, but obviously Macron's managed to sort of form a relationship with Trump. And I think there is a way around this sort of quite extreme politics on both sides, if you have sort of, in terms of foreign policy. Because again, civil servants sort of tone you down, and a lot of it isn't that, Corbyn, the Prime Minister, luckily, isn't a dictatorship. So there are lots of checks and balances. So yes, Corbyn would be extremely bad for British foreign policy. His views are totally abhorrent. But I don't think that it would lead to some kind of disaster and breakdown in relation to a series of countries. He's obviously quite pro-Putin as well, in terms of his response to the Novichok poisonings in the UK.
In Ukraine especially.
And in Ukraine, extremely sort of mould attitude towards Russia. And obviously he's been on RT, and McDonnell's been on RT. And it just shows that Corbyn's attitude to foreign policy is backwards. And it's some sort of socialist 1970s sort of haven, where he's grown up in university sort of thinking that
never had a proper job,
and he's just been an MP for 30 years, and he's got all these idealistic sort of ideas about British foreign policy that are totally backwards and totally wrong. But again, I think there are enough checks and balances, luckily, to keep the UK safe for just for now. Maybe not in the future though.
I mean, obviously we're both relatively young, and amongst our age group, the majority back Labour, or certainly did back Labour. Why do you think it is that so many people our age don't care about the fact that Corbyn so clearly has been sympathising with terrorist groups and dictatorial regimes, and also don't recognise anti-Semitism as proper racism, or don't care about it?
Do you know what's strange? I spoke to one of my friends who's sort of my age. You would expect him to be conservative because A, he grew up in a conservative area. B, he runs his own business. C, he's sort of relatively right-wing on a few issues. But he said he would vote for Labour because free tuition fees. And I just think that young people haven't seen this stuff. It's historic. This stuff, it's not on the forefront of their minds. They haven't seen their friends and family die in IRA bombings. They haven't seen soldiers go out and be killed by these people. They haven't seen this stuff. And it's just sort of, it's more of an idea rather than a reality for them. And why should they care about that when their house prices are so high, when their tuition fees are so high, when their borrowing is so high, when their wages are so low? This stuff is sort of second rate to them. Much more important to them to have these idealistic left-wing views where they get everything for free, which is just absolutely brilliant. And obviously Corbyn and the left claim the moral high ground. How can they be racist when they're so anti-racist? How can they be against or pro these sort of terrible regimes when they're so against the terrible Israeli regime, which is committing a supposed genocide against the people in Palestine? They've got the moral high ground, supposedly, on all these issues. And I think we're finally seeing a turnaround, though. I think we're seeing a turnaround with young people. I think the fact that these anti-Semitism stuff is coming out. And the stuff that, all these terrible regimes that he's supported is coming out. I think there is a bit of a turnaround. We're claiming the moral high ground back from Labour.
I mean, do you think one of the reasons the far left, and I'd say Corbyn's far left, are allowed to, or have been able to claim the moral high ground on certain issues, is because the centre-left and the centre, the kind of mainstream journalists, have been too tolerant of them in a way that they never would have been for the far right?
I think there's definitely a double standard. I mean, we've explored this before. I think when when journalists describe the hard left and the far left, they don't use the same vernacular, they don't use the same sort of language as they do about the far right. They don't see it as such a threat. And obviously they are treated in totally sort of hypocritical, I can't say that word, let's start again. Hypocritical. So these newspapers, they don't see the left as an equivalent to the right, because they see the right as some kind of Nazism. You know, it's the whole thing of communism versus Nazism. You're allowed to be called a communist on live TV on Piers Morgan. You're allowed to say, I'm a communist, you idiot. Yeah. And that's cool. Communism is now cool, apparently.
I mean, everyone in kind of the media class, etc., knows that fascism, rightly, obviously, knows that fascism is bad and awful.
Terrible.
But the same view doesn't seem to apply across the board to communism.
And this is the problem.
Communism is much more socially acceptable, and generally far left views are far more socially acceptable. Even though, in my view, they're just as hateful,
I've looked into why this is,
authoritarian.
and it's partly, apparently, this one historian thinks it's because Stalin and the communists didn't discriminate in the same sense that Hitler did.
Yeah.
So Hitler said, Jewish people, black people, homosexual people, we're going to kill you all in a terrible genocide that's absolutely abhorrent, disgusting. But the way that Stalin and the terrible communist leaders, Mao, murdered 100 million people wasn't through some kind of ethnic or sort of cultural background. It was more to do with class, and it was sort of a huge amount of famine, and there wasn't any concentration camps. Obviously there were gulags, but not to the same extent of concentration camps. So I think that because there was no discrimination at a sort of ethnic minority, then there isn't this sort of uproar that there is for fascism, when there should be an uproar, because these are real people. And there's a great Twitter and sort of campaign called Victims of Communism. And I think that people really need to remember that this terrible ideology has murdered millions, tens of millions of people, and it always leads to this. There's never been a time where communism is attempted and there is no sort of dictatorship, authoritarian, terrible mass murder, killings, and it's absolutely awful. So I think that there's a huge, and a lot of people just simply ignore it. They just simply ignore it. It's not there. Yeah. So a huge hypocrisy.
I mean, Corbyn can't come to power in the UK without the support of the centre left. I mean, the far left couldn't win an election on its own, and when it's tried to set up its own party, they bombed. So they've taken over the Labour Party, and at the moment they're kind of being facilitated by the centre left. Now, I can understand why people are reluctant to leave the Labour Party and want to stay and fight. But do you think the centre left, the moderate left, are being actively immoral by potentially putting Corbyn into number 10 Downing Street?
I think that if they genuinely believe in a decent society where anti-Semitism is totally wiped out of the face of society, then they should resign from their positions. They should put their money where their mouth is. They should quit the Labour Party. They should set up their own group of MPs, either independent or a new party, and say, look, we're not on this guy's side. This guy's gone way too far. We've got Tom Watson, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, coming out and condemning this terrible anti-Semitism. We've got other moderate Labour MPs, Stella Creasy, I think his name West Sterling or something. What is that? Do you know that guy?
West Sterling.
West Sterling. Yes, so these people on Twitter, they always come out and say, enough is enough, and this is terrible and this is terrible, Jess Phillips, people like that. They need to put their money where their mouth is. I wouldn't say they're being immoral. They've been in this Labour Party for their whole lives. Yeah. They feel like it's part of their identity. But they've really got to look back on themselves and think, what did I do to help stop this anti-Semitism? Was words enough?
And if Corbyn ends up in number 10 and is the disaster on the whole range of policies that I'd expect him to be, the centre left will be responsible, because they will be, or partly responsible, because he can't achieve
totally
power
responsible
without
for Corbyn.
centre left.
I mean, they just are. They instigated these new rules in the Labour election in 2015, where you could sign up for £3, and the reason they did that was to try and reduce the power of the trade unions. Yeah. And in the end, they increased the power hugely of the public, who obviously the people who are going to vote in the Labour Party elections are going to be very, very left wing, and they're to blame for Corbyn. It's totally their fault, and they should take it. They should accept that. And they obviously tried their hardest. They resigned en masse. But they've now come back on the shadow cabinet. Why are they taking these positions? Owen Smith, for example, even ran against Corbyn, and then he took another position in his cabinet, in the shadow cabinet. So these people aren't putting their money where their mouth is.
One final question. So obviously Labour has very different leadership election rules to the Tories.
Of course, yeah.
So it's much easier to get on the ballot, which is how Corbyn managed to become Labour leader. Now, who do you think, if the Conservatives had a similar system, so relatively few MPs nominate you, and then
Mogg would win. Mogg would
you
win.
think Mogg would be the next one?
Oh yes. If the betting was good enough, then Mogg would win. Yes.
So do you think Mogg? So with the current system, do you think Mogg would win?
I think it's no. Basically no, because the Tory MPs wouldn't vote him in.
But he would win if he went through the membership.
If he went through the membership, he would win by a landslide.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, obviously there's Tory MP, there are polls out by Conservative Home that says sort of he's a bit below and everything, and Boris Johnson's top. I'm not sure I believe them. I think if it comes down to it, Tory members would vote for Mogg in droves. But from what I've heard in my sort of very, very limited knowledge, Boris Johnson will run against Theresa May in October, apparently. And with Pritchard Patel and Jacob Rees-Mogg by his side, and this is apparently what's going on.
Okay.
Not confirmed. This is just what I've heard from rumours. And
is this from good sources or from some like bloke
I
in
would
the
say
pub?
pretty good sources.
Okay.
Not quite the bloke in the pub. But if that happens, I think Boris would win.
Do you?
I think he would beat Theresa May, because if they unified around Boris, he would win.
But before it gets to the members, though, they'll have to do a vote of confidence for MPs. And don't you think May would have a good chance of surviving that, or beating any challenge amongst the MPs?
It all depends how strong the ERG is.
Yeah.
So I think she has a chance of winning that vote. So I think you need something like 100 and something, 162. I can't remember the exact number of what you need.
Basically.
But basically 150 round MPs you need for a vote of no confidence to Theresa May to work.
Yeah.
So you can trigger the vote of no confidence.
I think they could trigger it easily.
Trigger it
that
40
wouldn't be
or
a
something.
problem.
That
Trigger
wouldn't
it
be a
easily.
problem. But winning that is hard. I think that Theresa May's got a fighting chance of winning that, depending on how the Chequers deal goes down. I think the Tory MPs are just waiting for her to concede more on the Chequers deal. Okay. And when and if she does, then I think they've got a really good chance of winning that sort of no confidence vote, because the Conservatives, all they have to do is look at the polls.
Yeah.
And the one thing that motivates Conservative MPs is losing their seat. And this is why UKIP was so successful, because Tory MPs were terrified of losing their seats at general elections. So they gave in on these sort of relatively UKIP policies and
like, for example, having the referendum.
Like, for example, having the referendum, leaving the single market, leaving custody, everything, control of the borders.
Yeah.
The one thing that terrifies Tory MPs is losing their seats. And if they think they're going to lose their seats, Theresa May's gone.
Okay. Well, Steve, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, and you,
so,
James.
as I say, Steve's from the Politics UK YouTube.
Politics UK, yeah.
Which I'll put a link in the description, because, I mean, a shout out from my channel, let's face it, it's quite big for you.
Honestly, it beats me. I get millions of views.
So I've got 103 subscribers, he's got about 26,000. We're on slightly different levels.
Rubbish. The quality is the same.
Thank you.
If you're better.
And the flattery's better from your end, I think. But yeah, Steve, thank you very much for your time. It's been really, really interesting. And thank you for watching, and see you.